They thought the barn was empty. That's what the officers said when they first arrived at the old Whitaker farm in Pine Ridge. Just another collapsed structure baking under the Arkansas sun. Until Zeus, Officer Jackson Miller's canine partner, refused to move. He barked so loud, so long, it echoed like thunder across the dry fields. You don't ignore a bark like that, especially when it's coming from a dog like Zeus. The other officers chuckled, already heading back to their cruisers. "Just a raccoon, Jackson," Deputy Collins called out. "Let's wrap it up." But Jackson knew better. 5 years with Zeus had taught him the difference between alert and alarm. This wasn't a drug scent. This wasn't tracking a fugitive. This was different. Zeus's bark had changed, and that sound was trying to say, "Someone is in there." "We've got less than a day," Jackson muttered. "If they're still alive at all." Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The small town of Pine Ridge, Arkansas had always been defined by its relationship with the land. Population 2,876 according to the faded welcome sign. It was the kind of place where folks still nodded to strangers and left their doors unlocked at night. For Jackson Miller, it had been home for all of his 58 years, except for the time he'd spent overseas during Desert Storm. Jackson adjusted his department-issued cap and wiped sweat from his brow. At his side, Zeus remained rigid, his German shepherd body tense as a drawn bowstring. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the abandoned Whitaker property, the barn's weathered wood almost silver in the harsh light. Tall grass had reclaimed the once tidy farmyard, and the fence posts leaned like tired old men. "Zeus, enough," Jackson said, not meaning it. The dog ignored him completely, continuing to bark at a specific section of the barn floor, scratching frantically at the weathered boards. Deputy Collins sighed loudly, kicking at some loose straw. "Jackson, we've got actual calls to respond to. This place has been abandoned for years. Nothing but rats and maybe some teenagers looking for a place to drink beer." Jackson knelt beside Zeus, placing a calloused hand on the dog's back. He could feel the vibration of each bark through his palm. In their 5 years together, he'd never seen Zeus this insistent, this certain. "Something's off," Jackson said quietly, more to himself than to the others. "This isn't his regular alert. This is different." Sheriff Bill Harrison stepped forward, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. At 60, with retirement looming in months, not years, Harrison had seen enough to know when to listen. "Jackson, what's your gut telling you?" "That we need to check beneath these boards," Jackson replied, pointing to where Zeus continued to scratch and bark. "Right here. Something's under there." Harrison hesitated, glancing at his watch. It was nearly 5, and his grandson's baseball game started at 6. The sun was already beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows through the barn's broken slats. "All right," Harrison conceded. "Collins, go get the pry bar from my truck." As Collins trudged off, muttering about wild goose chases, Jackson knelt beside Zeus. The dog's dark eyes were fixed on the floor, his powerful body trembling with urgency. "What is it, boy?" Jackson whispered. "What do you hear?" Zeus whined, a sound so mournful it sent a chill down Jackson's spine despite the heat. In all their years working together, through drug busts, missing hikers, and even a prison escapee, Jackson had never heard Zeus make a sound like that. It was the sound of desperation, of knowledge that couldn't be communicated in words. The barn suddenly felt different to Jackson, not abandoned, but waiting, not empty, but hiding something. As Collins returned with the pry bar, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they found beneath those weathered boards would change everything. Jackson's mind drifted back to the day Zeus came into his life as Collins worked to pry up the first board. It had been almost 4 years ago, though it seemed like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. The memory was sharp enough to cut. Zeus hadn't always been the proud, confident canine that the department relied on today. Jackson remembered how the animal control officer had called him directly, bypassing protocol. "Miller, we've got a German Shepherd here. Someone found him chained to a tree out by Cleary Creek. Been beaten. Starved." The officer's voice had been tight with controlled rage. "He's got potential, though. Thought of you, with your background in canine training." Jackson had been in a dark place then. 3 years after losing Claire to cancer, and 6 months after the explosive argument that sent his only daughter Emily storming out of his life. He'd thrown himself into work, taking double shifts, volunteering for the worst calls, as if punishing himself might somehow balance the scales. "I'm not looking for a project," Jackson had said, his voice flat. But he went anyway, driving out to the shelter after his shift ended. The dog had been a sorry sight, huddled in the back of a kennel, ribs showing through matted fur, a half-healed gash along his flank, eyes that watched everything with wary intelligence. Not aggressive, the shelter worker noted with surprise, just waiting, assessing. Jackson had knelt by the kennel door, not making eye contact, just existing in the same space. After 10 minutes of silence, the dog had moved forward just an inch. After 20, he'd come close enough for Jackson to smell the fear on him. His owner was arrested for running a dog-fighting ring, the shelter worker explained. This one wouldn't fight. That's why he's beat up so bad. Something about the dog's quiet dignity in the face of cruelty had reached through Jackson's grief. That night he'd dreamed of Claire for the first time in months. "He needs someone," she'd said in the dream, her face as clear as the day he'd met her 30 years earlier at the county fair. "And so do you, Jack." The next morning he'd called the shelter before they opened. 2 weeks later, after gaining the dog's tentative trust, Jackson had brought him home and named him Zeus, after Claire's favorite constellation. Claire had always said the Walker hound they'd had when they were first married was a gift from God. But Zeus was something else entirely. Claire would have called him an angel with fur instead of wings. Training Zeus hadn't been easy. The dog had trust issues that mirrored Jackson's own. But Claire's voice seemed to guide him, patience he didn't know he possessed surfacing when he needed it most. "You're not giving up on him," Sheriff Harrison had observed 6 months into the training, when most of the department had written Zeus off as too damaged to be effective. "He hasn't given up on himself," Jackson had replied simply. The first time Zeus successfully tracked a missing hiker, finding the elderly man who'd wandered off the Piney Woods Trail, something had shifted in both of them. Purpose. Connection. A reason to get up in the morning that went beyond mere survival. Dr. Robert Thompson had been there that day, volunteering with the search party as he often did for community emergencies. The distinguished pediatrician had clapped Jackson on the back after Zeus found the hiker. "That's quite an animal you've got there, Jackson," Thompson had said, his silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Almost like he can read minds." Jackson remembered feeling an odd chill at the doctor's words, though he'd dismissed it at the time. Thompson had been their family doctor for years, had treated Emily for strep throat and set her arm when she fell from the oak tree in their backyard. He'd even been one of Claire's doctors during her cancer treatment, stopping by the house with casseroles his wife had made. But something in the way Thompson had looked at Zeus that day, assessing, calculating, had struck a discordant note. Zeus had noticed it too. Normally comfortable with people the department trusted, Zeus had maintained a careful distance from Thompson, never allowing the doctor to pet him. At the time, Jackson had attributed it to Zeus's lingering wariness around men. Now, with Zeus frantically digging at the barn floor, that memory resurfaced with new significance. The biggest blow had come 18 months ago when Emily had returned briefly for Claire's memorial service. At 26, his daughter had grown into a poised young woman, her mother's determination evident in the set of her jaw. Zeus had approached her cautiously, and to Jackson's surprise, Emily had knelt to greet the dog. "He's beautiful, Dad," she'd said, the first words she'd spoken directly to him in years. For a moment, Jackson had felt hope bloom. But then Dr. Thompson had arrived to pay his respects, and the moment shattered. "Emily! Look at you, all grown up," Thompson had exclaimed, embracing her with the familiarity of a longtime family friend. Jackson had watched as Emily stiffened, making her excuses moments later and leaving the gathering early. When he'd called her the next day, she'd already returned to Chicago, leaving only a terse message with her Aunt Martha about needing space. Zeus had seemed to understand Jackson's renewed grief, staying close in the weeks that followed, nudging his hand when he'd sit staring at old photographs late into the night. His sister Martha had tried to bridge the gap between father and daughter. "She's still hurting, Jack," Martha had said during one of their Sunday dinners. "Claire was her world too, you know, and then you just checked out." "I was trying to keep a roof over our heads," Jackson had protested, the old argument rising like bile. Martha's expression had been gentle but unrelenting. "You were hiding in your work. There's a difference." Zeus had sensed his distress that night, placing his head on Jackson's knee under the table, those intelligent eyes seeing too much. The dog had become more than a partner. He was Jackson's conscience, his compass. When Jackson would get lost in regrets or anger, Zeus would appear with a leash in his mouth, demanding the walks that kept them both sane. In the 3 years since Zeus had become part of the K-9 unit, he'd developed a reputation bordering on supernatural. He'd found a child who wandered away from a church picnic by tracking a scent through a thunderstorm. He'd located drugs hidden in secret compartments that had stumped the most experienced officers. Most impressively, he'd tracked an elderly dementia patient through 5 miles of woodland, finding the woman curled beneath a fallen tree, hours from death in the unseasonable cold. After each success, Jackson would catch Dr. Thompson watching them at community events, his interest seemingly benign but persistent. Thompson often asked detailed questions about Zeus's training, about his abilities, about what made him different from other K-9s. "Just curious from a medical perspective," Thompson would say with his practiced smile. "The bond between handler and animal is fascinating, almost like they developed their own language." In retrospect, Jackson realized he'd shared too much, proud of Zeus's accomplishments and eager to talk about the one bright spot in his life. He'd told Thompson about Zeus's uncanny ability to sense emotions, to find people who didn't want to be found, to detect lies through subtle changes in body language. Now, as Collins finally pried up the first weathered board in the abandoned Whitaker barn, Jackson felt a growing certainty that Zeus had been trying to tell him something important about Thompson all along. "Jesus, it's like these boards are nailed down from underneath," Collins grunted, leveraging his weight against the pry bar. Zeus's barking had intensified, his entire body vibrating with urgency. As the first board came loose with a groan of rusted nails, the dog thrust his muzzle toward the dark opening, his bark changing to a high, anxious whine. Sheriff Harrison shone his flashlight into the small gap. "There's something down there," he said, his voice tight. "Get the rest of these boards up, now." Jackson put his hand on Zeus's head, steadying both the dog and himself. "Easy, boy," he murmured, though his own heart was racing. "We'll find them." As more boards came up, revealing a makeshift hatch in the barn floor, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would change Pine Ridge forever. Something that would explain why Zeus had always kept his distance from the town's most beloved doctor. Something that would finally bring Emily home or drive her away for good. Zeus had found something in this forgotten place, or someone. And Jackson knew with bone-deep certainty that they didn't have much time. With the last board pried away, the trapdoor lay exposed, a square of darkness that seemed to swallow the beam of Harrison's flashlight. Zeus was frantic now, pacing and whining, his training barely containing his urgency to descend. "I'm going down," Jackson said, already reaching for his own flashlight. Harrison grabbed his arm. "Wait for backup, Miller. We don't know what's down there." "Zeus knows," Jackson replied, gently removing the sheriff's hand. "And whatever it is, it can't wait." The opening revealed a crude ladder descending into darkness. The smell that rose from below made Jackson's stomach turn. Damp earth, human waste, and something else. Something that raised the hair on the back of his neck. Fear. Pure, distilled human fear had a scent all its own, and Zeus had been trained to recognize it. "Stay up here," Jackson ordered Zeus, knowing the dog would try to follow him down the narrow opening. "Guard!" Zeus reluctantly obeyed, positioning himself at the edge of the opening, every muscle tense. Jackson descended slowly, the old wood of the ladder creaking beneath his weight. His flashlight illuminated a dirt-floored cellar, not much larger than a modest bedroom. At first he saw nothing but old farm equipment and moldering cardboard boxes. Then his light caught movement in the far corner. "Sheriff," he called up, his voice tight. "We've got children down here." The next few minutes were chaos. Harrison radioed for ambulances while descending the ladder himself. Collins followed, cursing steadily under his breath. Jackson moved slowly toward the corner where his flashlight had revealed 4 small figures huddled together, bound at the wrists with zip ties. "It's okay," he said softly, crouching to appear less threatening. "We're police officers. We're here to help you." One of the children, a boy who couldn't be more than 8, raised his head. His face was filthy, eyes sunken with dehydration, but something flickered in them at the sight of Jackson's uniform. Hope, maybe, or just the last reserves of survival instinct. "Can you tell me your name, son?" Jackson asked, moving slowly closer. The boy's voice was a cracked whisper. "Ethan. Ethan Walker." Jackson felt a jolt of recognition. Walker. The name had been on missing person bulletins for weeks. Ethan Walker, 8 years old, disappeared from the neighboring county while his mother was working a late shift at the diner. Son of Army medic David Walker, killed in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. "Ethan, I'm Officer Miller. We're going to get you all out of here, okay?" The other children remained curled protectively around each other. 2 girls, maybe 10 and 7, and another boy, younger than Ethan. All showed signs of severe dehydration and malnourishment. Jackson carefully cut the zip ties binding Ethan's wrists, wincing at the raw skin beneath. "When's the last time you had water, Ethan?" he asked, reaching for the canteen on his belt. "Yesterday," Ethan whispered. "He stopped coming 2 days ago." Jackson helped the boy take small sips, while Harrison radioed their findings to dispatch, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We've got 4 minors. All appear to match descriptions from regional missing persons reports. Need immediate medical assistance, child services, and a full crime scene unit." Within 20 minutes, the quiet Whitaker farm had transformed into a sea of flashing lights. EMTs carefully extracted the children one by one, carrying them up the narrow ladder to waiting ambulances. Dr. Melanie Peters from the county hospital was first on the scene, her face grim as she conducted preliminary assessments. "Severe dehydration," she told Jackson as they prepared to transport the children. "The smallest girl is in critical condition. If you hadn't found them today—" She didn't need to finish the thought. Zeus had found them just in time, hours later, maybe less, and they would have been recovering bodies instead. As the last child was loaded into an ambulance, Jackson's sister Martha arrived, her county-issued child services vehicle pulling up beside the police cruisers. "Jack, she called, hurrying toward him, clutching a stack of folders. "I came as soon as I heard. These are the files on all the missing children from the surrounding counties." Martha's face was pale, her hands shaking slightly as she handed him the files. At 61, she'd been with Child Services for nearly 30 years, but Jackson had never seen her this rattled. "There's something else," she said, lowering her voice. "I recognized the little girl, the youngest one. Her name is Lily Thompson." "Thompson?" Jackson repeated, his mind racing to make connections. "Any relation to Dr. Robert Thompson?" Martha nodded, her expression troubled. "His granddaughter. She disappeared from a church picnic 3 weeks ago. Robert's been beside himself. I can't believe she was here all this time." Jackson felt Zeus press against his leg, a warm, solid presence that anchored him as his mind spun with implications. Robert Thompson's granddaughter among the captives. It didn't make sense, unless it was meant to deflect suspicion. "Did they say anything?" Martha asked. "About who did this to them?" Before Jackson could answer, Sheriff Harrison approached, his face set in grim lines. "We found something else," he said quietly, gesturing for Jackson to follow him back to the barn. Inside, the crime scene unit had fully opened the hidden cellar, revealing its full contents. In addition to the corner where the children had been kept, there was a crude table with medical supplies. And something else, a digital timer, still counting down. It read 23:47:14. "What is that?" Jackson asked, though he already suspected the answer. "The ME thinks it's how long they had left," Harrison replied, his voice tight. "Based on their condition, dehydration would have become fatal within 24 hours. Someone set this up, left them to die, and set a damn timer to mark it." Jackson felt a cold fury building inside him. "They need to check for fingerprints, DNA, anything." "Already on it," Harrison cut in. "But Jackson, there's something else." He led Jackson to a small metal box that had been found on the table. Inside were 4 children's ID bracelets, the kind used in hospitals. Each had a name, blood type, and a series of numbers. "These aren't just random kidnappings," Harrison said. "This is organized. The numbers match case files from at least 3 counties. Someone's been targeting specific children." As they spoke, Dr. Peters approached, her medical bag in hand. "Sheriff, Officer Miller," she nodded to each of them. "I need to tell you something about the children's condition." Her expression was carefully neutral, but Jackson could see the anger beneath. "They've all been sedated repeatedly. I found injection sites on all 4 of them, consistent with someone who knows what they're doing, someone with medical training." The implications hung in the air between them. Someone with medical training. Someone who would know how to keep children sedated without killing them. Someone like a doctor. "We can't jump to conclusions," Harrison warned, seeing the look on Jackson's face. "We need evidence." "Zeus is evidence," Jackson replied. "He's been trying to tell me something about Thompson for years." Harrison's expression hardened. "A dog's behavior isn't admissible in court, Miller. You know that. We need hard evidence." The sheriff turned to Dr. Peters. "How soon can the children talk to us?" "Not for at least 24 hours, she replied firmly. "They're severely traumatized, dehydrated, and the sedatives need to clear their systems. They need rest and security before anyone questions them." Jackson nodded, knowing she was right, but feeling the pressure of time bearing down on them. If Thompson was involved, he'd know by now that the children had been found. He'd be covering his tracks, or worse, fleeing. "I want to station Zeus at the hospital," Jackson said, "for the children's protection." Harrison looked like he might object, then nodded. "Fine. But you're to follow protocol, Miller. No vigilante justice. If Thompson is involved, we'll get him by the book." As they exited the barn, Jackson spotted Thompson's silver Mercedes pulling up to the police barricade. The doctor emerged, his normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, his silver hair uncombed. "I came as soon as I heard," he called, approaching the officers. "Is it true? They found Lily?" Jackson felt Zeus go rigid beside him, a low growl building in the dog's chest. The sound sent a chill down Jackson's spine. In 4 years, he'd never heard Zeus growl like that, a sound of pure recognition and threat. "Dr. Thompson." Sheriff Harrison stepped forward, subtly positioning himself between Jackson and the doctor. "Yes, we've found 4 children, including a girl who matches Lily's description. They're on their way to County General now." "Thank God!" Thompson's relief appeared genuine, his eyes filling with tears. "Can I see her? I should be there when she wakes up." "The children are in isolation for now," Dr. Peters interjected smoothly. "Hospital protocol for trauma cases. Family visits will be arranged once they're stabilized." Thompson nodded, though Jackson noticed how his gaze kept sliding toward the open trap door, then away. Of course. I understand protocol." He turned to Jackson, his expression sympathetic. "I hear your K-9 found them. That's remarkable, Officer Miller. You must be very proud." Zeus's growl deepened, and Jackson had to issue a quiet command to keep the dog at his side. "Zeus did what he's trained to do, Doctor. He found people who needed saving." Thompson's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well, this town owes you both a debt of gratitude. Please keep me informed about Lily's condition. Her parents, my son and daughter-in-law, are flying in from Boston." As Thompson turned to leave, he hesitated, glancing back at the barn. Did they find who did this?" "Investigation's ongoing," Harrison replied neutrally. "We'll keep the family updated." They watched Thompson drive away, the Mercedes kicking up dust on the dirt road. Only when the car was out of sight did Jackson turn to Harrison. "You saw that, right? Zeus never reacts that way. Never." Harrison's expression was troubled. "I saw it. But Miller, Thompson's been the town doctor for 30 years. He delivers babies, for Christ's sake. We need more than a dog's reaction before we start pointing fingers at a man like that." Jackson knew Harrison was right, but he couldn't shake the certainty growing inside him. Zeus was never wrong, not about people, not about danger. "I want to check his alibi for when each child went missing," Jackson insisted. "And I want a warrant to search his home and office." Harrison sighed, rubbing his face with one hand. "On what grounds exactly? That your dog doesn't like him? The judge would laugh us out of court." Jackson's phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Dr. Peters had sent him a preliminary medical report on the children. As he scanned it, his blood ran cold. "Sheriff," he said quietly, holding out the phone, "the blood work shows a specialized sedative in their systems. Propofol. It's not something you can buy on the street. It's controlled, tracked." Harrison read the report, his expression darkening. "Still not enough for a warrant, but enough to check who's been ordering it locally?" Jackson pressed. After a long moment, Harrison nodded. "I'll make some calls. In the meantime, you and Zeus head to the hospital. Keep an eye on those kids. If Thompson shows up there, we'll be watching," Jackson finished, already heading for his cruiser, Zeus at his heels. As they drove toward County General, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and crimson. The beauty seemed obscene against the horror they'd uncovered. Jackson glanced at Zeus in the rearview mirror, the dog's alert posture unchanged despite hours of intensity. "Good boy," Jackson murmured. "You found them. You saved them." But as the hospital came into view, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of something much darker. And somewhere in Pine Ridge, a timer was still counting down. County General Hospital buzzed with unusual activity as Jackson led Zeus through the emergency entrance. The normally quiet, rural hospital had transformed into a hive of law enforcement, medical personnel, and increasingly, news reporters gathering outside. A deputy stationed at the pediatric ward nodded grimly as Jackson approached. "They're all in there," he said. gesturing toward a corridor where additional officers stood guard. Doc Peters says the little one's touch and go, but the others are stabilizing. Zeus walked with focused intensity, his training evident in every controlled step. Still, Jackson could feel the dog's awareness heightened, scanning every person they passed. In the small waiting area, Jackson spotted Martha deep in conversation with a hospital administrator, her expression strained as she arranged emergency placements and services. "Jack," she called, excusing herself, "the older children are awake." "Ethan's asking for the dog police officer?" Her eyes were red-rimmed, her normally neat appearance disheveled. "What those babies have been through," she trailed off, unable to continue. "Zeus and I will check on them," Jackson assured her. "Any word on family members being contacted?" Martha nodded. "Ethan's mother is on her way. She works 3 jobs and was at the factory when we reached her. The others, we're still working on it, and Lily's parents are on a flight from Boston." As they spoke, a nurse hurried from the secured ward. "Officer Miller, Dr. Peters asked for you and your K9. The Walker boy is agitated and she thinks seeing your dog might help calm him." Jackson followed her through the secured doors, Zeus padding silently beside him. The pediatric ward had been transformed, with the 4 rescued children placed in a shared room for security and monitoring. Dr. Peters stood at Ethan's bedside, checking the IV delivering fluids to his dehydrated body. "Officer Miller," she acknowledged, "Ethan here has been asking about your partner." The boy looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, his arms stick-thin with bruised needle marks visible against pale skin, but his eyes lit up at the sight of Zeus. "Is that him?" he asked, his voice stronger than it had been in the cellar. "The dog who found us?" Jackson moved closer, bringing Zeus to the bedside. "This is Zeus. He heard you when nobody else could." Zeus, displaying the gentle demeanor he reserved for victims and children, slowly approached the bed, sniffing Ethan's outstretched hand before resting his chin on the edge of the mattress. The tension in Ethan's small body visibly eased. "I heard him barking," Ethan whispered. "When it got real quiet down there after the man stopped coming, I told the others someone would find us. I heard a dog. They said I was dreaming." Jackson swallowed hard. "You weren't dreaming, son. Zeus doesn't give up when someone needs help. Doctor." Peters motioned Jackson aside. "I need to speak with you," she said quietly. Once they were out of earshot, she continued. "The tox screens came back. All 4 children have the same sedative cocktail in their systems. Propofol primarily, but also midazolam. These are controlled substances used for surgical sedation. Someone with medical access administered these regularly." "Someone like Thompson," Jackson said. Dr. Peters's expression remained neutral. "I'm just giving you the medical facts, officer. What I can tell you is these drugs require careful dosing based on weight. These children were sedated by someone who knew exactly what they were doing." Before Jackson could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. He turned to see Robert Thompson at the nurse's station, his authoritative voice carrying, "I understand protocol, but I'm that child's physician as well as her grandfather. I need to assess her condition immediately." Jackson felt Zeus stiffen beside him, the dog's hackles rising. "Stay with Ethan," he instructed Dr. Peters, moving swiftly toward the confrontation. "Dr. Thompson," Jackson said evenly, positioning himself between the doctor and the ward entrance. "As I believe Dr. Peters explained, the children are under isolation protocols until further notice." Thompson's pleasant facade slipped for just a moment, a flash of something cold and calculating crossing his features before the concerned doctor persona returned. "Officer Miller, I appreciate your dedication, but surely you understand my position. Lily is my granddaughter, and I'm the most experienced pediatrician in 3 counties. Which is why you'll understand the need to follow trauma protocols," Jackson replied. "The children are receiving excellent care from Dr. Peters." Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. Peters is barely 5 years out of residency. These children need experienced care. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, especially given the medications they've been exposed to. I reviewed the preliminary tox screen. Propofol can have serious after effects if not properly managed. A chill ran down Jackson's spine. The tox screen results had only just come in. They hadn't been shared beyond the immediate investigation team. "How exactly did you review that tox screen, Doctor?" Jackson asked quietly. Thompson blinked, the only sign that he'd realized his mistake. "Hospital privileges, of course. I have access to all patient records as the chief of pediatrics." "Not for patients under police protection, you don't," Jackson said. His hand instinctively moved toward his service weapon, though he didn't draw it. "I think you need to come with me to answer some questions, Dr. Thompson." Sheriff Harrison, who had just entered the hospital, approached quickly. "What's going on here?" "Doctor, Thompson somehow has detailed knowledge of the children's tox screens," Jackson explained, not taking his eyes off Thompson. "Information that wasn't available to anyone outside the investigation." Thompson's demeanor changed instantly, his expression wounded. "Bill, you can't possibly think I had anything to do with this tragedy. I've known you for 30 years. I delivered your grandson, for God's sake." Harrison hesitated, the conflict evident on his face. "Robert, we're just trying to understand how those children ended up in that cellar, and how you have information about their condition that wasn't made public." "I told you. Hospital privileges," Thompson insisted, though his confidence seemed to waver. "This is absurd. My granddaughter is among those victims." "A convenient cover," Jackson said. "Who would suspect the grandfather of one of the victims?" Thompson's face flushed with anger. "I don't have to listen to these accusations." "I'm leaving now to call my attorney." As he turned to go, Zeus appeared in the hallway, having slipped away from Ethan's room. The dog positioned himself at the exit, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on Thompson. A low growl rumbled from his chest. "Call your dog off, Miller," Thompson demanded, his voice rising. "This is harassment." Jackson made no move to recall Zeus. "He's not attacking, Doctor. He's just making sure you don't leave before we finish our conversation." A nurse approached cautiously. "Dr. Thompson, there's something you should know. Dr. Peters ordered a specialized blood panel for Lily. Something about an unusual genetic marker?" Her expression was puzzled. "She wanted to confirm Lily's identity." Thompson went very still. That's unnecessary. I can confirm her identity." "Actually," Dr. Peters said, joining them in the hallway, "it is necessary because the little girl we're calling Lily Thompson doesn't have the rare blood disorder documented in Lily's medical records. She's not your granddaughter, Dr. Thompson." The silence that followed was deafening. Thompson's composure cracked, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the hospital's cool air. "There must be some mistake," he insisted, but his voice had lost its authority. Harrison stepped forward. "Robert, I think it's best if you come down to the station to answer some questions." "Am I under arrest?" Thompson demanded. "Not at this time," Harrison replied carefully. "But we do need to clear up some inconsistencies." Thompson's gaze darted around the hallway, calculating. "I need to use the restroom first. Then I'll come, willingly." Harrison nodded to a deputy. "Escort Dr. Thompson to the restroom and then directly to my car." As Thompson was led away, Jackson turned to Dr. Peters. "Is it true about the blood disorder?" She nodded grimly. "Lily Thompson has a documented case of von Willebrand disease, a bleeding disorder. None of these children have it. I noticed the discrepancy when reviewing their charts." "So he's been lying about his granddaughter being among the victims," Jackson said. "But why?" "To insert himself into the investigation," Harrison surmised. to monitor what we know. A shout from down the hall interrupted them. The deputy who had escorted Thompson came running back, his face flushed. "He's gone! Went through the window in the bathroom," Harrison cursed, already reaching for his radio. "All units, be on the lookout for Dr. Robert Thompson, now a suspect in the Whitaker Farm kidnappings, last seen at County General, possibly driving a silver Mercedes sedan." Jackson whistled sharply to Zeus. "We need to find him before he disappears," he said to Harrison, "or before he gets to any other victims." "Other victims?" Martha had approached, overhearing the commotion. "The timer," Jackson explained grimly. "Why have a countdown unless there are others somewhere? Zeus and I will try to track him from the bathroom window." Harrison nodded. "Go. I'll coordinate the search from here." Zeus led Jackson to the bathroom where Thompson had escaped. The window was small, but a desperate man could squeeze through. Outside, Zeus immediately picked up Thompson's scent, pulling Jackson toward the staff parking lot. "His car's gone," Jackson radioed to Harrison, "but Zeus has his scent." They followed the trail to where the Mercedes had been parked. Zeus sniffed the ground, then looked up at Jackson with focused intensity. "Good boy," Jackson murmured. "Find him." As they returned to Jackson's cruiser, his phone rang. The number was blocked. "Miller?" he answered tersely. "Officer Miller?" Thompson's voice was calm, controlled. "I see the game has changed." "There's no game, Thompson." "Turn yourself in before this gets worse." A soft chuckle came through the phone. "Worse? For whom? I'm not the one with a ticking clock to worry about." Jackson's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The children you found were just phase 1, Thompson said. "A trial run, if you will. The others don't have the luxury of being found by your miraculous dog. They have exactly 18 hours left, maybe less depending on the temperature." "Where are they?" Jackson demanded. "That would spoil everything," Thompson replied. "But I'll give you a sporting chance. Your remarkable Zeus found the first group. Let's see if he can find the others without a direct scent trail. Consider it a scientific experiment in canine capabilities." "This isn't an experiment, you sick bastard. These are children." "They're research subjects," Thompson corrected coldly. "And they've provided valuable data. Did you know Zeus heard them through 6 feet of earth and a sealed hatch?" "Extraordinary. I've been studying him for years, you know. Ever since he found that dementia patient everyone else had given up on." Jackson struggled to keep his voice steady. "Tell me where they are, and I'll make sure the DA knows you cooperated." Another soft laugh. "You still don't understand, do you? This was never about harming children. It's about understanding the limits of perception. Your dog perceives things no human can detect. I needed to know how and why." "By kidnapping and torturing children?" Jackson's voice rose in disbelief. "Collateral research," Thompson dismissed. "The focus was always Zeus. How does he do it, Miller? How does he hear what can't be heard, smell what shouldn't have a scent? You should be proud. He's quite remarkable." The call disconnected abruptly. Jackson immediately radioed Harrison. "Thompson just called me. There are more children hidden somewhere with less than 18 hours left. He's fixated on Zeus's abilities, says this was all some kind of test." Harrison's voice crackled through the radio. "Jesus Christ. Did he give any clues to their location?" "Nothing specific, but he mentioned Zeus hearing the first group through 6 feet of earth." A horrible thought struck Jackson. "Sheriff, we need to check all the recent burial sites in the area. Cemeteries, construction sites, anywhere with fresh dirt." "You think he buried them alive?" Harrison's horror was evident even through the static. "I think he's testing how good Zeus really is," Jackson replied grimly. "And I think we have less than 18 hours to find out." As Jackson ended the call, he looked down at Zeus, the weight of what lay ahead settling on his shoulders. 4 children saved, but how many more were out there slowly running out of air? "It's up to us, boy," he said softly, rubbing the dog's ears. "We need to find them before time runs out." Zeus looked up at him with unwavering focus, as if understanding every word. Then, as if making a decision, the dog turned and began pulling toward the cruiser, eager to begin the hunt. Behind them, the hospital continued its frantic activity, the rescued children now safe but bearing wounds that would take far longer to heal than their physical injuries. And somewhere in Pine Ridge, a digital clock continued its merciless countdown. The cruiser's tires kicked up dust as Jackson sped down the county road, Zeus alert in the back seat. Dusk was settling over Pine Ridge, painting the sky in watercolors of orange and purple while casting long shadows across the rolling farmland. In 18 hours, it would be noon tomorrow, a deadline that hammered in Jackson's mind with each passing mile. "All units be advised," Harrison's voice crackled over the radio. "We're setting up a command post at the station. I need a list of all properties owned or connected to Robert Thompson, as well as any recent construction or excavation in the county." Jackson keyed his mic. "Sheriff, I'm heading to Thompson's lake house first. It's isolated, private, perfect place to hide something. Or someone." "Negative, Miller," Harrison replied. "Thompson will expect that. He'll be watching his known properties. We need to think like him. Where would he hide children that would truly test Zeus's abilities?" Jackson fell silent, considering. Thompson's words echoed in his mind. 6 feet of earth and a sealed hatch. The man wasn't just kidnapping children. He was conducting some twisted experiment on Zeus's tracking abilities. As if sensing his thoughts, Zeus whined softly from the back seat. "I know, boy," Jackson murmured. "We'll find them." His phone rang. Martha. "Jack?" Her voice was tight with urgency. "I've been going through Thompson's connections in my files. He served on the board of directors for 3 children's charities and regularly volunteered at the county foster care office. He had access to files on vulnerable children across 5 counties. Jackson's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "He was selecting targets. Yes, but there's more. I spoke with Ethan. He said Thompson told the children they were part of a special medical study, that they were helping other kids by participating. He manipulated them," Jackson said, "made them think they were doing something good." "Jack," Martha hesitated. "Ethan also mentioned hearing Thompson talk on the phone about the next group, said something about them being deeper to increase the challenge." "Deeper," Jackson repeated, a cold realization forming. "Martha, what about the old mining tunnels out by Sawyer's Ridge? They were sealed up years ago, but they run all through those hills." "The mining company went bankrupt in '98, Martha recalled. "Left those tunnels abandoned. County was supposed to fill them in, but the funding got pulled." Jackson was already turning the cruiser toward the eastern hills. "Tell Harrison that's where we're heading. Thompson would know those tunnels. He treated miners with black lung for years." "Be careful, Jack," Martha urged. "Thompson's not just a kidnapper. From what the children said, he's been planning this for years. He's obsessed with Zeus." After disconnecting, Jackson glanced at Zeus in the rearview mirror. The German shepherd sat alert, ears forward, sensing the urgency of their mission. The road to Sawyer's Ridge was barely maintained, more dirt than gravel. As they climbed into the hills, Jackson's mind traveled back to when these mines were active, when Pine Ridge had been a thriving coal town rather than a fading rural community. His father had worked these mines, coming home black with coal dust, until silicosis took him at 52. Thompson would have treated miners like his father, would have known their stories, their struggles, would have known the layout of the tunnels from their descriptions. As the road narrowed, Jackson spotted a familiar silver glint through the trees, Thompson's Mercedes, partially hidden by overgrowth near one of the old mine entrances. "Dispatch, this is Miller," he radioed. I've located Thompson's vehicle at the old Ferguson mine entrance on Sawyer's Ridge, requesting immediate backup. Copy that, Miller. All available units responding. ETA 20 minutes. Sheriff advises you to wait for backup. Jackson looked at the setting sun, then at his watch. Negative dispatch. Possible victims inside with limited oxygen. Zeus and I are proceeding. He released Zeus from the cruiser, the dog immediately alert, nose working the air. Find them, boy, Jackson encouraged softly. Find the children. Zeus moved with purpose toward the old mine entrance, partially collapsed but still passable. Jackson drew his service weapon and flashlight, following closely as they entered the dark mouth of the tunnel. The air inside was cool and damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth and decay. Jackson's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating support beams sagging with age. Zeus moved confidently, his training evident in every careful step despite his obvious urgency. They proceeded deeper, the main tunnel branching into smaller ones. At each junction, Zeus paused, testing the air before choosing a direction. 20 minutes in, they reached a section where the ceiling had partially collapsed, requiring them to climb over a pile of rubble. "Careful, boy," Jackson murmured as Zeus navigated the unstable debris. Beyond the collapse, the tunnel widened into what had once been a large extraction chamber. Jackson's flashlight revealed abandoned equipment rusted with decades of neglect. Zeus suddenly froze, his posture rigid, nose working overtime. "What is it, boy?" Jackson whispered, scanning the chamber with his light. Nothing seemed out of place among the mining relics. Zeus whined, moving to a section of the floor that looked recently disturbed. The earth was darker there, the dust pattern different from the surrounding area. Jackson approached cautiously, his light revealing what appeared to be a metal hatch, similar to the one at the Whitaker farm, but newer, embedded in the mine floor. "Good boy," Jackson breathed, heart pounding. "Good boy, Zeus." As he knelt to examine the hatch, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Impressive, isn't he?" Jackson whirled, weapon raised. Robert Thompson stood in a side tunnel entrance, a small device in one hand that looked like a remote control. "That's far enough, Thompson," Jackson ordered. "Hands where I can see them." Thompson smiled, seemingly unconcerned by the gun pointed at his chest. 17 hours and 26 minutes, he said, glancing at his watch. "Much faster than I calculated. Zeus continues to exceed expectations." "There are children down there, aren't there?" Jackson demanded, keeping his weapon trained on Thompson while Zeus growled low in his throat. "3 of them," Thompson confirmed casually. "A controlled experiment." This location is approximately 12 feet deeper than the farm cellar, with a more sophisticated air exchange system. I wanted to see if depth affected Zeus's perception. He tilted his head, studying the dog with clinical interest. "Apparently not." "You're going to open that hatch," Jackson said, his voice deadly calm. "Now." Thompson held up the device in his hand. "This controls the air supply. One wrong move from you and it shuts off completely. The children would suffocate within minutes." Jackson felt cold fury wash over him. Why? Why do this? Science requires sacrifice, Officer Miller. Surely you understand that. Your remarkable dog has abilities that defy conventional explanation. The way he found that dementia patient in the swamp. Impossible by any standard tracking metric. The way he detected that girl trapped in the well last summer. Extraordinary. So you kidnapped children to test him? The disgust in Jackson's voice was palpable. Thompson's expression hardened. "Don't be obtuse. The children were necessary controls. I needed to isolate the variables: depth, air quality, duration of captivity. Zeus found each test group with increasing efficiency. Do you have any idea what that means for search and rescue technology? For understanding the limits of canine perception?" While Thompson spoke, Jackson was calculating distances, angles. Zeus remained focused on Thompson, awaiting command. "You know what I think?" Jackson said, taking a careful step forward. I think you're not doing this for science. I think you enjoy the power, controlling who lives and who dies." A flash of anger crossed Thompson's face. "You're reducing groundbreaking research to base psychology? Disappointing, Miller. I expected better from you." "Open the hatch," Jackson repeated, "or I swear to God I'll put a bullet in you right here." Thompson's smile returned, cold and confident. "Then the air stops. Are you willing to risk 3 young lives on your marksmanship? Can you guarantee you'll hit me before my finger presses this button?" The standoff stretched between them, neither man willing to concede. In the tense silence, Jackson's mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. He couldn't risk the children's lives, but every minute wasted gave Thompson more control. "What do you want?" Jackson finally asked. "A deal? Immunity?" Thompson laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally in the chamber. "This was never about escaping consequences, Miller. It's about completing the research. One final test." He nodded toward Zeus. "I want to know how he does it. I want brain tissue samples, neural mapping. I want to understand the biological mechanism behind his abilities." Jackson felt sick. "You want to kill my dog for research?" "Not kill, study. Though yes, the process would be terminal." Thompson's clinical detachment was more chilling than any rage. "In exchange, I'll open the hatch. The children go free." "You're insane," Jackson said flatly. "I'm a scientist," Thompson corrected. "One child died in my early trials before I perfected the containment system. Regrettable but not meaningless. Her sacrifice led to improvements that saved others." The casual admission of murder struck Jackson like a physical blow. "You killed a child." "She expired during the research," Thompson said dismissively. "Different thing entirely. Now, about my proposal." "Zeus, take him!" Jackson commanded sharply. The German shepherd launched forward with explosive speed, catching Thompson off guard. The doctor stumbled backward, the control device flying from his hand as Zeus's weight knocked him to the ground. In seconds, the dog had Thompson's arm in his jaws, restraining, not mauling, exactly as he was trained. Jackson rushed forward, kicking the fallen device away before Thompson could reach it. "Don't move," he ordered, aiming his weapon at Thompson's head while the man struggled under Zeus's grip. "You've made a terrible mistake," Thompson gasped, blood seeping from where Zeus's teeth had pierced his sleeve. "Without the code, that hatch won't open. The air system will shut down automatically in 17 hours. Jackson knelt, keeping his gun trained on Thompson while retrieving handcuffs from his belt. "Zeus, release," he commanded. The dog immediately obeyed, backing up but remaining vigilant as Jackson secured Thompson's wrists. "The code," Jackson demanded, rolling Thompson onto his side. "Now! And give up my leverage?" Thompson sneered despite his position. "I think not." Jackson dragged Thompson to a support beam, securing him to it with a second set of cuffs. "Zeus, guard," he instructed, then turned his attention to the hatch. It was steel, with an electronic keypad lock similar to a safe. Without the code, forcing it open might be impossible without specialized equipment. His radio crackled to life. "Miller, this is Harrison. We're approaching the mine entrance. What's your status?" "I have Thompson in custody and have located what appears to be another containment chamber," Jackson reported. "There's an electronic lock requiring a code. Thompson claims 3 children are inside with limited air supply." "Roger that. We've got a tactical team and EMTs right behind us." Jackson turned back to Thompson. "Last chance to give me that code voluntarily. Things will go better for you." Thompson's scientific demeanor had given way to spite. "You'll have to kill me, Miller. And we both know you won't do that." A memory surfaced suddenly. Thompson at the town's 4th of July picnic last year, entering his phone passcode while Jackson happened to be looking over his shoulder. Thompson was a creature of habit, using the same four-digit sequence for everything from his phone to his gym locker. "I don't need to kill you," Jackson said, turning to the keypad. 0725. Thompson's birthday, July 25th. The keypad beeped, a green light illuminating as the lock mechanism disengaged. Jackson pulled the heavy hatch open, the hinges protesting with a metallic groan. Below, in a space no larger than a small bedroom, 3 children huddled together on thin mattresses. Their faces turned upward at the sudden light, expressions shifting from fear to desperate hope. "It's okay," Jackson called down to them. "We're police officers. We're here to help you." One of the children, a girl perhaps 10 years old, began to sob with relief. The others remained frozen, as if afraid to believe their ordeal might be ending. "Zeus found you," Jackson told them, his voice gentle. "He heard you when no one else could." As if understanding his role, Zeus approached the edge of the opening, looking down at the children with soft eyes, his tail wagging slowly. The smallest child, a boy no more than 6, pointed up in wonder. "The dog," he whispered. "You heard the dog in my dream." Sheriff Harrison and his deputies arrived moments later, securing Thompson, while Jackson helped the tactical team extract the children from their underground prison. They were dehydrated and frightened, but otherwise unharmed. Thompson had apparently been maintaining them carefully for his experiment. As the last child was lifted to safety, Jackson felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. Zeus pressed against his leg, a solid, reassuring presence. They had won this round, saved these children, but at what cost? And how many others had they been unable to save? Outside, the mine entrance blazed with emergency lights as ambulances prepared to transport the rescued children. Thompson sat in the back of a patrol car, his expression unreadable as he watched the activity. Harrison approached Jackson, his face grim in the harsh lighting. "We found documents at Thompson's lake house. This has been going on for years, Jack. Not just here, across 3 states. We're looking at dozens of cases that might be connected." "He admitted to killing at least 1 child," Jackson said, the words bitter in his mouth. "Called it an early trial." Harrison shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. "The FBI's being called in. This is bigger than anything we've dealt with before." As they spoke, Jackson's phone rang. Martha's name flashed on the screen. "Jack," her voice was tight with emotion, "Ethan's been asking for you. He's having nightmares, says he won't feel safe until he sees Zeus again." "We'll be there as soon as we wrap up here," Jackson promised. "There's something else," Martha continued. "I've been going through old case files. Do you remember that family that went missing 3 years ago? The Reeves family?" Jackson frowned. "Vaguely. They disappeared on a camping trip, right?" "Yes. Their bodies were found 6 months later, ruled as exposure and hypothermia. Except," Martha paused, "except their 10-year-old daughter was never found. And guess who was on the search committee?" "Thompson," Jackson guessed, a cold weight settling in his stomach. "He called off the search in the area where we now know the mining tunnels extend, said it was too dangerous, that they should focus elsewhere." Jackson closed his eyes briefly. He took her, used her for his first experiment. "I think so," Martha agreed quietly. "And Jack, the Reeves girl had a rare genetic condition, one that made her particularly sensitive to sedatives. The first one who died," Jackson realized. "He's been refining his methods ever since." As they disconnected, Jackson looked toward the ambulances where the rescued children were being evaluated. In the back of the patrol car, Thompson watched the activity with clinical detachment, as if observing specimens rather than lives he had nearly destroyed. Zeus whined softly, drawing Jackson's attention back to the present. The dog looked up at him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. "Come on, boy. Jackson said quietly. "We've got one more stop to make tonight." As they walked toward their cruiser, the night sky above Pine Ridge glittered with stars, indifferent to the horror and heroism that had unfolded beneath them. Behind them, evidence technicians continued to process the scene, documenting Thompson's elaborate experiment with clinical precision. Jackson thought of Ethan waiting at the hospital, frightened and asking for Zeus. He thought of his own daughter Emily, somewhere in Chicago, unaware of what her father had just been through. He thought of all the connections broken and forged by trauma and healing. The cruiser's headlights cut through the darkness as they descended from Sawyer's Ridge, leaving the mine and its grim secrets behind. Ahead lay the hospital, where children saved from darkness waited for reassurance that the nightmare was truly over. Zeus sat alert in the back seat, a silent guardian still on duty. In the rearview mirror, Jackson caught the dog's reflection, those knowing eyes that had seen too much darkness but somehow remained uncorrupted by it. "Good boy," Jackson whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "Good boy." County General Hospital glowed like a lighthouse against the night sky as Jackson pulled into the parking lot. It was just past midnight, the building's windows illuminated squares of activity against the darkness. News vans had multiplied since his earlier visit, reporters standing in pools of camera light recounting the day's events for viewers across the state. Jackson bypassed the media circus, using the staff entrance where a deputy recognized him with a nod. Zeus padded beside him, still alert despite the exhaustion that must have been setting in after hours of intense work. The pediatric ward remained under guard, though the atmosphere had shifted from emergency to recovery. "Officer Miller," Dr. Peters greeted him in the hallway, her scrubs wrinkled from the long day. "You found them." It wasn't a question, but an expression of quiet amazement. "Zeus found them," Jackson corrected, reaching down to touch the dog's head. "How are the children doing?" "Stable," she replied. "Dehydrated, traumatized, but physically intact. The first group is resting comfortably. Ethan's been asking for you. For Zeus, really." A small smile touched her lips. "That boy thinks your dog walks on water." "He just might," Jackson said softly. Martha emerged from the children's room, her eyes widening at the sight of her brother. "Jack!" She hurried toward him, embracing him tightly. "Thank God! The news is saying you captured Thompson, that you found more children?" "3 more," Jackson confirmed. "All alive, thanks to Zeus." Martha pulled back, studying his face. "And you? Are you okay?" The question caught him off guard. Was he okay? He'd confronted a monster today, one who had been hiding in plain sight for years, a trusted doctor who had used his position to prey on vulnerable children, who had wanted to kill Zeus for research. "I'll be fine," he said, the standard response of a man trained to put duty before personal feelings. Martha's expression told him she saw through the evasion but wouldn't press. "Ethan's mother, Laura, arrived an hour ago. She hasn't left his side." "How's he doing?" "Better, now that his mom's here, but he's still having flashbacks, nightmares. He keeps talking about the doctor with cold hands and the dog in his dreams." Martha's voice softened. "He needs to see Zeus, Jack, to know the nightmare's really over." Jackson nodded. "That's why we're here." Martha led them to Ethan's room, knocking softly before entering. Inside, Laura Walker sat beside her son's bed, her work uniform still on, dark circles under her eyes testifying to her exhaustion. Ethan lay propped against pillows, an IV delivering fluids to his thin arm. His eyes, too large in his pale face, lit up at the sight of Zeus. "You came back," he said, his voice stronger than it had been earlier. "Of course we did," Jackson replied, guiding Zeus closer to the bed. "Zeus wanted to check on you." The German shepherd approached the bed with gentle caution, his training evident in how he modulated his movements around the injured child. Ethan reached out a trembling hand, and Zeus lowered his head to meet it. "He heard me," Ethan said, looking up at Jackson with absolute conviction. "When we were in the dark place, I dreamed about a dog barking. I told the others someone was coming for us, but they didn't believe me." Laura Walker's eyes filled with tears. "I can never thank you enough," she said to Jackson, one hand protectively stroking her son's hair. "They told me what happened, how close it was." Her voice broke. "Zeus deserves the credit," Jackson said, uncomfortable with gratitude for doing his job. "He's the one who wouldn't give up." Ethan's small hand remained buried in Zeus's fur, drawing comfort from the dog's solid presence. "Is the bad doctor going away forever?" he asked, his voice suddenly smaller. Jackson knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "Yes, Ethan. He can't hurt you or anyone else ever again. I promise." Ethan nodded, seeming to accept this assurance. "Zeus knew he was bad," he said with the simple certainty of a child. "That's why he found us." Out in the hallway, Sheriff Harrison waited, his expression grave. "Jack, we need to talk," he said quietly when Jackson emerged from Ethan's room, leaving Zeus temporarily with the boy. They moved to an empty waiting area, Harrison rubbing his face wearily before speaking. "The FBI's here. They've been going through Thompson's records. It's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" Jackson asked, though part of him didn't want to know. 12 cases across 3 states over the past 5 years. All missing children, all fitting the same profile, isolated, vulnerable, with some connection to Thompson's medical practice or the charities he worked with. Harrison shook his head. "And those are just the ones we can confirm so far." "Jesus," Jackson breathed. "There's more." They found a journal at his lake house, detailed notes on Zeus, observations going back to when you first got him. Thompson was obsessed with his tracking abilities, called him the perfect subject. Jackson felt cold anger rising again. He was using those children to test Zeus, to see if he could find them under increasingly difficult conditions. Harrison nodded grimly. The first 3 experiments were failures. The children didn't survive. After that, he refined his methods, better air systems, proper hydration schedules. He was getting ready to publish his findings in some obscure European scientific journal, had a manuscript nearly completed. Publish? Jackson was incredulous. He was going to publicly admit to kidnapping and killing children? Not in those terms. The manuscript disguised the methodology, made it sound like theoretical work or simulations. Harrison's disgust was evident. The FBI is bringing in their behavioral analysis unit. They think Thompson may be one of the most organized serial predators they've ever encountered. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Jackson's shoulders. All these years, the respected town doctor had been conducting monstrous experiments, using children like lab rats, all while maintaining his benevolent public persona. "What happens now?" Jackson asked. "Thompson's being transferred to federal custody in the morning. The U.S. attorney is already talking multiple life sentences?" Harrison hesitated. "But there's a complication, Jack. Thompson's claiming he has one more research site with subjects still alive. He's refusing to reveal the location unless he gets to examine Zeus first." "Examine?" Jackson repeated, though he understood perfectly what Thompson meant. His exact words were tissue samples and neural mapping. Harrison's expression was grim. "He wants to kill your dog, Jack, to complete his research." "Not happening," Jackson said flatly. "Of course not," Harrison agreed quickly. "But if there are more children out there—" "He's lying," Jackson said with certainty. "We found documents for both sites, the farm and the mine. There was nothing indicating a third location." "The FBI thinks so too," Harrison confirmed. "But they want to be sure. They're bringing in a negotiator to try to break him down." Jackson's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced down, then froze. staring at the screen. "Jack?" Harrison prompted. "What is it?" "It's from my daughter," Jackson said, his voice strained. "Emily. She's here." In Pine Ridge. Before Harrison could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "Officer Miller, there's someone here asking for you. Says she's your daughter?" Jackson followed the nurse to the hospital lobby, his mind racing. Emily hadn't set foot in Pine Ridge in over a year, not since Claire's memorial service. Now she was here, tonight of all nights. Emily stood by the reception desk, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a Chicago University sweatshirt. At 27, she looked so much like Claire it made Jackson's chest ache. She turned as he approached, her expression a complex mixture of worry and uncertainty. "Dad?" she said, her voice catching slightly. "Emily," he responded, stopping a few feet away, unsure of his welcome. "What are you doing here?" "It's all over the news," she explained, "even in Chicago. K-9 officer uncovers child kidnapping ring. They showed your picture and Zeus." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "I called Aunt Martha. She told me what happened." Jackson didn't know what to say. After so much estrangement, after all the angry words and painful silences, his daughter had dropped everything and driven 7 hours because she'd seen him on the news. "Are you okay?" Emily asked when he didn't speak. The simple question, the same one Martha had asked, somehow broke through the wall he'd maintained all day. "It was bad, Em," he admitted, his voice rough. "Really bad." Emily closed the distance between them, wrapping her arms around him in a fierce hug. After a moment of shock, Jackson returned the embrace, holding his daughter for the first time in too long. "I was so scared," she whispered against his shoulder. "When I saw your face on the news, all I could think was that I might never get to tell you." "Tell me what?" Jackson asked gently as she pulled back. "That I'm sorry," Emily said, tears welling in her eyes. "For staying away so long. For the things I said after Mom died." Jackson shook his head. "You had every right to be angry. I wasn't there for you when you needed me most." "We were both grieving," Emily acknowledged. "But life's too short for this distance between us. Seeing you on TV, hearing what happened, I realized I could have lost you today without ever making things right." Before Jackson could respond, Zeus appeared in the hallway, having apparently convinced a nurse to let him out of Ethan's room. The German shepherd approached cautiously, eyeing Emily with curious recognition. "Zeus," Emily said, kneeling to greet the dog. "You remember me?" Zeus sniffed her hand, then pressed his head against it, accepting her touch with immediate trust. Emily laughed softly, the sound achingly familiar to Jackson. "Martha told me what he did," she said, looking up at her father as she petted Zeus. "How he found those children when no one else could. She said he saved your life, too." "He did," Jackson confirmed, "in more ways than one." A commotion at the hospital entrance drew their attention. FBI agents in tactical gear were escorting someone in, an elderly man in handcuffs, his silver hair disheveled, his normally distinguished features twisted with rage. "Thompson," Jackson murmured, instinctively moving to place himself between Emily and the prisoner. Zeus's reaction was immediate and alarming. The normally disciplined dog stiffened, a low growl building in his throat as he focused on Thompson. Jackson placed a restraining hand on Zeus's collar, feeling the tremor of tension running through the animal's body. Thompson's gaze locked onto Zeus, his expression changing from anger to cold, calculating interest. "Remarkable," he said, loud enough for Jackson to hear despite the agents flanking him. "Even now he recognizes the threat. Such extraordinary neural pathways." "Keep moving," one of the agents ordered, pushing Thompson forward. But Thompson resisted, his eyes never leaving Zeus. "Just imagine what we could learn from him, Officer Miller. The lives that could be saved if we understood his capabilities. One dog for potentially thousands of human lives. A fair exchange, wouldn't you say?" Jackson felt Emily's hand close around his arm, whether to steady him or herself, he wasn't sure. "There's another site, Miller," Thompson continued as the agents began forcing him forward again. "The timer's already running down. Tick-tock." "He's lying," Jackson said, more to himself than to Emily. "We found all the sites." "Are you certain?" Thompson called back, his voice fading as they took him toward the secure wing. "Certain enough to bet children's lives on it?" When Thompson was finally out of sight, Jackson felt the tension drain from Zeus's body. The dog looked up at him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. "What was that about?" Emily asked, her face pale. "Another site? More children?" Jackson sighed heavily. "He's playing games, trying to leverage his way into studying Zeus. The FBI doesn't think there's another site, and neither do I. But a seed of doubt had been planted. What if they were wrong? What if somewhere more children were running out of air while Thompson played his sadistic games? Sheriff Harrison approached, his expression troubled. "Jack, the FBI wants to speak with you." "They're setting up in the conference room." Jackson nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was after the day's events. "Emily, I need to—" "Go," she said firmly. "Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you're finished." The FBI team consisted of 4 agents, their faces grave as Jackson entered the conference room. Zeus followed, settling at Jackson's feet as they sat around the table. "Officer Miller," the lead agent began, "I'm Special Agent Donovan. We understand you've had the most direct contact with Dr. Thompson. We need your assessment of his claim about another site." Jackson gathered his thoughts, aware of the weight of his words. "Based on everything we've found, I don't believe there's a third site. The documents at his home and the lake house detailed only 2 locations, the farm and the mine. Thompson is obsessed with Zeus's tracking abilities. This is his last attempt to get access to him." Agent Donovan nodded. "That aligns with our initial assessment. However, we can't afford to be wrong. We're bringing in a forensic psychologist to evaluate Thompson, and we've got teams going through every property connected to him." "What about Zeus?" Jackson asked. "Thompson seems fixated on him, on studying him." "Yes," Donovan agreed grimly. "Thompson's journal reveals an obsession bordering on mania regarding your canine partner. He believes Zeus possesses unique neurological abilities that could revolutionize search and rescue technology if they could be isolated and studied." "By killing him," Jackson stated flatly. "By dissecting his brain, yes," Donovan confirmed. "Obviously, that's not happening. But we may need to use Thompson's obsession against him. Make him believe we're considering his offer to get him to reveal if there actually is another site." Jackson stiffened. "You want to use Zeus as bait?" "Not physically," Donovan clarified quickly. "Just the suggestion that we might grant his request for examination. Enough to keep him talking until we can verify there are no other victims." The thought made Jackson sick, but he understood the stakes. If there were more children out there, every minute counted. "I'll do whatever it takes to find them, if they exist," Jackson said. "But I won't sacrifice Zeus, not even as a bluff." Donovan studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. We'll find another approach." The meeting continued for another hour, Jackson recounting every detail of his interactions with Thompson, every nuance that might help them determine whether the doctor was bluffing. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking over Pine Ridge, pale light filtering through the hospital windows. Jackson found Emily in the pediatric waiting room, curled in an uncomfortable chair, dozing. Zeus approached her quietly, resting his muzzle on her knee. She stirred, blinking awake. "Hey," she said softly, straightening. "How did it go?" "Long," Jackson replied, sinking into the chair beside her. "They're still questioning Thompson, but he's not breaking." Emily studied her father's exhausted face. "You don't believe him, do you? About there being more children?" Jackson hesitated. "My head says no. Every piece of evidence points to just the two sites, but—" He glanced down at Zeus, who had settled between them, alert despite the long night. "If I'm wrong, if we're all wrong—" "Then what happens?" Emily asked. "I don't know," Jackson admitted. "The FBI is searching every property linked to Thompson, interviewing everyone who knew him. If there is another site, we'll find it. Without giving him what he wants," Emily said firmly. "Without Zeus." "Without Zeus," Jackson agreed. As if understanding he was being discussed, Zeus raised his head, looking between them with those intelligent eyes that had saved so many lives. In that moment, Jackson made a decision. Whatever it took, he would protect both the children of Pine Ridge and the partner who had become his salvation. Emily reached over, taking her father's hand. "Whatever happens next, you're not alone anymore, Dad. I'm here." The simple statement, after so much distance between them, hit Jackson with unexpected force. He squeezed her hand in response, words momentarily beyond him. Outside the hospital windows, Pine Ridge was waking to a changed reality, a community forced to confront the monster who had lived among them, wearing the trusted face of a healer. But in this quiet moment between father and daughter, with Zeus keeping faithful watch, Jackson found a measure of peace amid the storm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Thompson would continue his manipulations. The investigation would uncover more horrors. But for now, in the growing light of a new day, they were together, and somehow that was enough. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hospital parking lot as Jackson emerged with Zeus and Emily. After a brief nap in the waiting room chairs, they decided to head home for a proper rest before returning to check on Ethan and the other children. Zeus walked between them, alert despite the exhaustion that must have been weighing on him after 24 hours of intense work. "Your place still standing?" Emily asked as they approached Jackson's truck, an attempt at normalcy that felt both strange and welcome. "Same as when you left," Jackson replied. "Maybe a little more dust." The drive through Pine Ridge was surreal. Overnight, their small town had transformed into the center of a media storm. News vans lined Main Street, reporters doing live stand-ups in front of the courthouse and police station. Locals gathered in small clusters, their expressions shocked as they discussed the monster who had lived among them for decades. "It's like they're talking about a different person," Emily observed, watching a group outside Maggie's diner shake their heads in disbelief. "The Dr. Thompson they knew versus the real one." "That's how predators like him operate," Jackson said, his voice tight. "They build a reputation, earn trust, makes it harder for victims to be believed." As they turned onto Oakwood Drive, Jackson's phone rang. Sheriff Harrison's name flashed on the screen. "Miller," he answered, putting the call on speaker. "Jack, we need you and Zeus back at the station," Harrison said without preamble. "Thompson's lawyer showed up and suddenly he's willing to talk, but only to you." Jackson exchanged a glance with Emily. "What's he saying?" "That he'll reveal the location of the supposed third site, but only in a face-to-face with you and Zeus." Harrison's frustration was evident even through the phone. "The FBI thinks it's worth pursuing just to be certain. We'll be there in 15, Jackson said after a moment's hesitation. As he ended the call, Emily studied her father's face. "You don't have to do this alone, you know." Jackson considered protesting, then thought better of it. "No, I don't," he agreed softly. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the Pine Ridge Sheriff's Department, now transformed by the presence of FBI vehicles and media trucks. Jackson led Emily and Zeus through a side entrance, avoiding the reporters clustered at the front steps. Inside, the normally quiet station hummed with activity. FBI agents coordinated search teams, deputies manned phones as tips poured in from across the county, and in the center of it all, Sheriff Harrison stood with Special Agent Donovan, their expressions grim. "Jack," Harrison nodded, eyeing Emily with surprise. "Emily, didn't expect to see you." "Family sticks together," she replied simply. Donovan stepped forward. "Officer Miller, Dr. Thompson is in interview room 1 with his attorney. He's been advised of his rights and understands this conversation is being recorded. Our behavioral analyst will be observing." "What's his play?" Jackson asked. "He claims to have information about a third site containing 2 children with approximately 12 hours of air remaining." Donovan's tone was clinical, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "He insists he'll only disclose this information to you with your K-9 present." "He's fixated on Zeus," Jackson said. "This could be just another attempt to get close to him." "We've considered that," Donovan acknowledged. "Thompson will be restrained and we'll have officers in the room. Your K-9 will be safe." Jackson felt Emily's hand on his arm. "I don't like this," she said quietly. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But if there's even a chance—" The interview room was stark. A metal table, 4 chairs, and mirrored glass hiding observers on the other side. Robert Thompson sat handcuffed to the table, his silver hair disheveled, his distinguished features now haggard after a night in custody. Beside him, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit watched Jackson enter with cold calculation. "Officer Miller," Thompson smiled, his gaze immediately fixing on Zeus. "And Zeus, of course. Thank you for coming." "I'm told you have information about another site," Jackson said, remaining standing while Zeus positioned himself beside him. "Direct as always," Thompson chuckled. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Jackson reluctantly took a seat across from Thompson, keeping one hand on Zeus's collar. The dog's posture was rigid, his focus unwavering on the man across the table. "This is Miss Aldridge, my attorney," Thompson said, gesturing to the woman beside him. "She's advised me that cooperation could potentially mitigate my sentencing." "I find the legal system's obsession with plea bargains rather fascinating, don't you?" "I'm not here to discuss legal strategy," Jackson said flatly. "You claim there are more children in danger." Thompson's smile faded, replaced by an expression of clinical interest. "Always the hero, aren't you, Miller? So focused on saving others. I've often wondered if that's why Zeus bonded with you so completely. Shared purpose, perhaps?" Jackson felt his patience wearing thin. "If you don't have actual information—" "Oh, but I do," Thompson interrupted. 2 children, a brother and sister, ages 7 and 9. Timothy and Sarah Grantham. Reported missing from Camden County last week while their mother was working a night shift. The police there assumed they'd run away to find their father. The specific details sent a chill down Jackson's spine. Thompson was either telling the truth or had constructed an elaborate lie. "Where are they?" Jackson demanded. Thompson leaned forward as much as his restraints would allow. "First, I need assurances. A formal agreement that in exchange for this information I'll be granted access to Zeus for 1 examination, non-invasive of course, just brain imaging, blood work, basic research." "Not happening," Jackson said immediately. Thompson sat back, disappointment evident. "Then I'm afraid those children will run out of air in," he glanced at his watch, "approximately 11 hours and 42 minutes. Jackson fought to keep his expression neutral, though rage boiled beneath the surface. "You're willing to let 2 children die to satisfy your curiosity?" Not curiosity, Miller. Scientific inquiry. There's a significant difference. Thompson's tone was reasonable, as if they were discussing an academic disagreement rather than lives at stake. Zeus is unique. His tracking abilities defy conventional explanation. The neural pathways that allow him to detect human distress through layers of earth and sealed chambers, imagine what we could learn, the lives that could be saved in the future. As Thompson spoke, Zeus suddenly stiffened, his attention shifting from the doctor to the door behind Jackson. A low whine escaped him, not a sound of threat, but of recognition. "What is it, boy?" Jackson murmured, turning to follow the dog's gaze. The door opened to reveal Martha, her face pale and drawn. "Jack," she said, her voice strained, "I need to speak with you, now." Thompson's expression changed subtly, a flicker of calculation that didn't escape Jackson's notice. "Excuse me," Jackson said, rising. "Zeus, stay." To his surprise, Zeus resisted the command, moving to follow him instead. The dog's behavior was so unusual that Jackson relented, allowing Zeus to accompany him into the hallway where Martha waited. "What's wrong?" he asked once the door closed behind them. Martha's hands trembled as she clutched a manila folder. "I've been going through Thompson's charity work trying to identify potential victims. The Children's Foundation he chaired, Brothers and Sisters United. I was on the board with him." Jackson nodded, not seeing the significance. "You've mentioned that before." "What I didn't mention," Martha continued, her voice dropping, "is that I processed all the applications. I vetted the families, Jack. I decided which children received services." A cold understanding began to dawn. "Martha, what are you saying?" "I gave him access to them." Her voice broke. "All these years I handed him the perfect victims. Children with limited family support, overworked parents, minimal supervision. I thought I was helping them." Zeus pressed against Martha's leg, a gesture of comfort that seemed to nearly break her. She reached down to touch his head with trembling fingers. "It's not your fault," Jackson said firmly. "Thompson manipulated everyone, not just you." "There's more," Martha whispered. "The Grantham children, they're real. Their application crossed my desk 3 weeks ago. Single mother, works nights, children often left alone. I approved them for the mentorship program. Thompson was assigned as their mentor." Jackson felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath him. Thompson wasn't lying about the children. He'd used Martha's own foundation to identify and access them. "Did you tell the FBI?" he asked urgently. Martha nodded. "Just now, they're cross-referencing the information, but Jack," she hesitated, "there's something else, something I didn't tell them yet." From the folder she withdrew a photograph, an old Polaroid showing a younger Martha and Thompson at what appeared to be a charity event. Between them stood a teenage girl with dark hair and Claire's eyes. Emily. "Thompson recommended Emily for a scholarship through the foundation when she was 16, Martha said quietly. "He took a special interest in her academic progress. Said she had extraordinary potential." Jackson's blood ran cold as pieces clicked into place. Emily's sudden aversion to Thompson at Claire's memorial service. Her abrupt departure from Pine Ridge after high school. The distance she'd maintained even from Martha. "Did he—" Jackson couldn't finish the question. "I don't know," Martha admitted, her eyes filling with tears. "But when I saw his records, how he selected children, the patterns, Emily fit the profile, Jack, and he had access to her through me." The interview room door opened and Special Agent Donovan emerged. "Officer Miller, we need you back in there. Thompson's getting agitated." Jackson hesitated, torn between the interview and the horrifying implications of what Martha had just revealed. "Go," Martha urged. "Find those children." We'll deal with the rest after they're safe." Back in the interview room, Thompson watched Jackson return with calculating eyes. "Family emergency?" he asked, his tone conversational. "Your sister seems distressed." The casual mention of Martha sent a wave of fury through Jackson. Had Thompson known all along that his connection to the children was about to be exposed? Was this entire interview just another game? "The Grantham children," Jackson said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Where are they?" Thompson smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "You see, Ms. Aldridge, I told you Officer Miller would come around to the importance of my research. You're willing to consider my proposal?" "No," Jackson said flatly. "But we know you selected the Granthams through Martha's foundation. We know you were assigned as their mentor. The FBI is checking your movements over the past week. It's only a matter of time before we find them, with or without your help." For the first time, Thompson's composed facade cracked. "Impossible. The records were encrypted." "Not the Foundation's records," Jackson interrupted. "Those were in Martha's office, complete with your signature on the mentorship assignment." Thompson glanced at his attorney, who subtly shook her head, a warning not to speak further, but the doctor's scientific arrogance overrode his legal caution. "Even if you know about the children, you'll never find them in time," he said dismissively. "The location is too remote, too well concealed. Not even Zeus could track them without a starting point." Jackson leaned forward. "Then give us the starting point. Prove that your research has value by saving lives, not taking them." It was a calculated appeal to Thompson's ego, and for a moment Jackson thought it might work. The doctor's expression turned contemplative. "A compromise, perhaps," Thompson suggested. "I provide coordinates for the general area. If Zeus can find them from there, I get my research data. If not," he shrugged, "2 more failures to add to my statistical analysis." Ms. Aldridge placed a restraining hand on Thompson's arm. "Dr. Thompson, I advise against—" "Lake Chatsworth," Thompson interrupted, ignoring his attorney. "The old hunting cabins on the North Shore. One has been modified. If your miraculous dog can determine which one, perhaps he truly is as exceptional as I believe." Jackson exchanged glances with Agent Donovan, who had remained silent in the corner of the room. The agent gave a subtle nod. They had what they needed. "We're done here," Jackson said, standing. "That's it?" Thompson seemed genuinely surprised. "No negotiation? No scientific curiosity about how Zeus does what he does?" Jackson looked down at the man who had caused so much suffering, who had used his position of trust to prey on the vulnerable, who might have targeted his own daughter. "Some things don't need to be dissected to be understood," he said quietly. "Zeus finds the lost because that's who he is. It's not a neural pathway or a genetic anomaly. It's loyalty, purpose, connection, something you could never understand." As Jackson turned to leave, Thompson called after him. "You're making a mistake, Miller. The research could save thousands of lives." Jackson paused at the door. "Zeus already saves lives, without hurting anyone. That's the difference between you and him." Outside in the hallway, the full force of what Martha had revealed hit him anew. Emily. Thompson had taken a special interest in his daughter. Had he? "Dad?" Emily's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. She stood at the end of the hallway, her expression concerned. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jackson couldn't bring himself to ask the question burning in his mind. Not here. Not now. First, they needed to find the Grantham children. Everything else would have to wait. "Thompson gave us a location," he said instead. "Lake Chatsworth. But it's not specific enough. There are dozens of cabins scattered around that lake." Emily's eyes widened. "So, there really are more children?" "It seems that way," Jackson confirmed grimly. A brother and sister. We need to move fast. Within minutes, a rescue operation was being assembled. FBI tactical teams, medical personnel, and local deputies prepared to converge on Lake Chatsworth, 30 miles north of Pine Ridge. Jackson and Zeus would lead the search, with Harrison coordinating from the command post. As Jackson prepared to leave, Emily caught his arm. "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "Em, this is a dangerous operation. I grew up at Lake Chatsworth," she interrupted. "Remember? Mom used to rent Cabin 8 every summer. I know those woods better than most of the deputies. You need me." Jackson wanted to refuse, to keep his daughter safely away from the danger. But she was right. Her knowledge of the area could prove invaluable, and after what Martha had revealed, he couldn't bear to let Emily out of his sight. "Stay with the command vehicle," he conceded. "No field work." Emily nodded, though the determined set of her jaw reminded him so much of Claire, it made his chest ache. Lake Chatsworth appeared tranquil in the late morning sun, its blue waters reflecting the surrounding pine forest. Summer cabins dotted the shoreline, most unoccupied this early in the season. The North Shore, where Thompson had directed them, contained the oldest and most remote structures. Hunting cabins built in the 1950s, many now fallen into disrepair. From the command vehicle, Harrison issued instructions to the search teams. "We've got 37 structures to check. Teams of 2, standard search protocols. Miller and Zeus will lead, focusing on any signs of recent activity." Jackson knelt beside Zeus, who remained alert despite the long hours without rest. "This is it, boy," he murmured. "Find them." As they prepared to begin the search, Emily approached with a local map spread in her hands. "Dad, wait. I've been thinking about Thompson's pattern. The farm and the mine were both underground containments, right? Hidden below normal structures?" Jackson nodded, seeing where she was heading. "So we should be looking for cabins with cellars or storage spaces underneath." "Exactly," Emily confirmed. "And I remember from our summers here, only a few of the original hunting cabins had root cellars. Most were just single-room structures." She pointed to several locations on the map. These 5 had cellars. 2 of them belonged to the Wilkins family. They're still in good repair and used regularly. But these 3 on the far north point, they've been abandoned for years. Jackson called Harrison over, showing him Emily's analysis. "We should concentrate our search here first," he said, indicating the 3 abandoned cabins. "Makes sense," Harrison agreed. "I'll redirect the teams." The drive to the north point took them along increasingly rough dirt roads. The FBI vehicles struggled with the terrain, but Jackson's truck, built for rural conditions, managed the ruts and washouts. Zeus stood in the back seat, head out the window, already working the air currents for any trace of human distress. As they approached the first cabin, little more than a dilapidated shack with a sagging roof, Zeus showed no particular interest. The second, a slightly larger structure with boarded windows, likewise failed to trigger any response from the dog. But as they neared the third cabin, Zeus's demeanor changed dramatically. He began pacing in the back seat, whining with the same urgency he'd displayed at the Whitaker farm. When Jackson stopped the truck, Zeus was pawing at the door before the engine even shut off. "This is it," Jackson radioed to the teams behind them. "Zeus has a hit on cabin 3. Approach with caution." The cabin appeared abandoned, its weathered logs greening with moss, the small porch partially collapsed. But fresh tire tracks in the muddy approach told a different story. Someone had been here recently. Jackson released Zeus from the truck, the dog immediately moving toward the cabin with focused intensity. FBI tactical teams took positions around the perimeter while Jackson followed Zeus to the porch steps. "Wait for the all clear," Agent Donovan instructed through the radio. But Zeus had already pushed past the half-open door, disappearing into the cabin's dim interior. Jackson followed, gun drawn. aware that he was violating protocol but unwilling to rein in Zeus when children's lives hung in the balance. Inside, dust motes danced in the thin beams of light penetrating the boarded windows. The cabin contained only basic furniture, a table, chairs, an old wood stove, all covered in years of grime. But Zeus paid no attention to any of it, instead moving directly to a faded rug in the center of the room. With his paw, Zeus scraped at the edge of the rug, revealing trapdoor beneath. Just like at the Whitaker farm, but newer, with a modern electronic lock. "In here," Jackson called to the teams outside. "We've got a sealed hatch." Tactical teams flooded into the cabin, securing the space as medical personnel prepared equipment. Agent Donovan examined the electronic lock, his expression grim. "Same setup as the mine," he observed. "Keypad entry, probably on a timer." Jackson knelt beside the hatch, placing his palm against the cool metal. "Timothy." "Sarah, can you hear me? We're police officers. We're here to help you." For a moment, silence. Then, faintly, a small voice replied, "Hello? Is someone there?" "Yes," Jackson called back, relief flooding through him. "We're going to get you out. Are you hurt?" "No," the child's voice answered, "but it's hard to breathe, and Sarah's really scared." "Tell Sarah it's going to be okay," Jackson assured them. "We're working on opening the door right now." Agent Donovan was already calling for technical support to bypass the lock, but Jackson remembered Thompson's pattern. The farm hatch had used a simple mechanical lock. The mine had used Thompson's birthday as the code. This one would likely follow the same logical progression. "Let me try something," Jackson said, studying the keypad. If the first code was based on Thompson himself, what would the next iteration be? On a hunch, Jackson entered the numeric representation of Zeus's name, 9521, using the position of each letter in the alphabet. Nothing happened. Think, he muttered to himself. What else was Thompson obsessed with? Then it hit him. Thompson's fascination wasn't just with Zeus, but with the connection between Handler and K9. The partnership. Jackson tried a new combination, 0920, his own birthday. The keypad beeped, a green light illuminating as the lock disengaged with a soft click. "It worked," Jackson breathed, already pulling the hatch open. Below, in a space similar to the previous containments but smaller, two children huddled together on a thin mattress. The girl, Sarah, had her arms wrapped protectively around her younger brother Timothy. Both were pale, their eyes huge in the sudden light from above. "It's okay," Jackson said gently. "We're here to help you." Zeus approached the edge of the opening, looking down at the children with soft eyes. Timothy pointed up in wonder. "The dog," he whispered. "I heard him in my dream." Medical personnel moved in to extract the children while Jackson stepped back, the weight of the past 36 hours suddenly crashing down on him. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd found all of Thompson's victims alive. As the Grantham children were lifted to safety and examined by medics, Jackson found Emily waiting outside the cabin, her face wet with tears of relief. "You did it," she said simply. "You and Zeus." Jackson shook his head, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "We all did it. Your knowledge of the cabins narrowed the search. Thompson never anticipated that." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe there are some things even brilliant psychopaths can't predict." As they watched the children being loaded into ambulances, Zeus suddenly stiffened beside Jackson, a low whine escaping him. Jackson turned to see what had alarmed the dog, but Zeus was already moving, not toward a threat, but toward the tree line at the edge of the clearing. "Zeus, come!" Jackson called. But the dog ignored him, something he rarely did. With growing concern, Jackson followed Zeus into the trees, Emily close behind. 20 yards into the forest, Zeus stopped at what appeared to be a freshly disturbed patch of earth. He began to dig frantically, whining with distress. "What is it, boy?" Jackson knelt beside Zeus, helping to clear away the loose soil. Within moments, they uncovered a small metal box, the kind used for cash or valuables. Jackson pried it open, dread building in his stomach. Inside lay a USB drive, a vial of what appeared to be blood, and a note in Thompson's precise handwriting. "If you're reading this, Zeus has exceeded even my most optimistic projections. The blood sample is his, collected when he was sedated during his last veterinary visit. I already have what I need for the research. The children were never the primary subjects. They were the stimulus to perfect his response. Thank you for your unwitting participation. R.T." Jackson stared at the note in horror, then at the vial of blood. Zeus's blood, taken without his knowledge, now potentially in the hands of whoever Thompson had partnered with. "Dad?" Emily's voice seemed to come from far away. "What is it?" Before Jackson could answer, a commotion erupted back at the cabin clearing. Shouts, then a single gunshot that echoed across the lake. Jackson sprinted back toward the cabin, Zeus racing ahead. As they burst into the clearing, they found FBI agents surrounding a fallen body. Thompson's attorney, Ms. Aldridge, a pistol lying beside her outstretched hand. "She had a concealed weapon," Agent Donovan explained grimly as Jackson approached. "When we found the children alive, she tried to destroy evidence on her phone. When we moved to stop her, she drew on us." She was his partner, Jackson realized, not just his lawyer. "More than that," Donovan confirmed. "We found correspondence on her phone. She's been working with Thompson for years, helping select victims, providing legal cover when suspicions arose. And she's not the only one. They have connections across state lines, other doctors, researchers." The implications were staggering. Thompson's operation was larger than anyone had suspected, with tentacles reaching far beyond Pine Ridge. As medics worked over Aldridge's unresponsive form, Jackson felt a new weight settle on his shoulders. They'd won this battle, saved these children, but the war was far from over. Somewhere out there, Thompson's research continued, his obsession with Zeus's abilities now in unknown hands. Zeus pressed against Jackson's leg, a warm, solid presence amid the chaos. Despite everything they'd uncovered, despite the horrors still to be faced, Jackson found strength in that simple connection. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But as he watched Emily speaking with Agent Donovan, a cold fear gripped his heart. Martha's revelation about Thompson's interest in Emily years ago remained a wound he hadn't yet addressed. Had his daughter been one of Thompson's targets? Had she escaped whatever fate he had planned for her? And most terrifying of all, did she know? The questions would have to wait. For now there were wounded to tend to, evidence to process, a conspiracy to unravel. But soon, very soon, he and Emily would need to have a conversation that was long overdue. Zeus whined softly, sensing his distress. Jackson knelt, wrapping his arms around the dog's sturdy frame, drawing comfort from his unwavering loyalty. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Good boy." Autumn painted Pine Ridge in shades of amber and gold as Jackson stood on his back porch, watching Zeus explore the perimeter of the yard with methodical precision. 3 months had passed since the events at Lake Chatsworth, yet the ripples continued to spread through their small community and beyond. The national media had eventually moved on to newer tragedies, but for those directly involved, healing came slower. Thompson now sat in a federal detention center awaiting trial, his network of accomplices still being untangled by FBI investigators. Each week seemed to bring new revelations, new horror stories of children targeted, experiments conducted, all under the guise of respected medical research. Jackson sipped his coffee, the morning chill seeping through his flannel shirt. The leaves crunched under Zeus's paws as the dog completed his inspection and returned to the porch, settling at Jackson's feet with a contented sigh. "Morning, you two," Emily called, stepping outside with her own steaming mug. At 30, she looked more like Claire than ever, though the past months had added a gravitas to her features that her mother had never carried. "Sleep okay?" Jackson asked, making room for her on the porch swing. "Better," she replied, sitting beside him. "No nightmares this time." The confession hung between them, an acknowledgment of the conversation they'd finally had 6 weeks after Lake Chatsworth, when Emily had revealed what she'd kept hidden for nearly 14 years. How Thompson had taken a special interest in her academic career. How he'd offered private mentoring sessions that gradually became uncomfortable. How she'd escaped what she now recognized as grooming only by winning a scholarship that took her far from Pine Ridge. She'd never told Jackson, afraid he wouldn't believe her accusations against the town's beloved doctor. Instead, she'd channeled her experience into studying psychology, eventually specializing in childhood trauma, healing herself by learning to heal others. "Ethan's family's coming for dinner tonight," Jackson reminded her. Laura called to confirm. Emily smiled. "I've got the apple pie in the oven already. That boy sure loves his desserts." The mention of Ethan Walker brought a warmth to Jackson's chest. The bond formed during those desperate hours in the barn cellar had evolved into something unexpected. After extensive interviews and counseling, it became clear that Ethan had no extended family able to care for him. His mother, Laura, working 3 jobs to keep them afloat, had reached her breaking point. It was Zeus who had nudged Jackson toward the solution. The way the dog gravitated to Ethan during their hospital visits, the calm that settled over the traumatized boy in Zeus's presence, it all pointed toward a connection that couldn't be ignored. Jackson had approached Laura tentatively, offering to have Ethan stay with him part-time to give her space to rebuild their lives. The arrangement had quickly formalized into a co-parenting situation that benefited everyone involved, especially Ethan, who blossomed under the stable influence of both Laura's maternal love and Jackson's protective guidance. The crunch of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Zeus's ears perked up, but his relaxed posture told Jackson it was someone familiar. Moments later, Martha's sedan appeared around the bend. "Jack," she called, waving as she parked. "Emily, beautiful morning, isn't it?" At 62, Martha carried herself with a new humility these days. The revelation of her unwitting role in Thompson's schemes had nearly broken her, but with therapy and Emily's forgiveness, she was slowly rebuilding her sense of purpose. The Children's Foundation had been reorganized under new leadership, with Martha serving as an advisor on strengthening protections for vulnerable families. "Coffee's hot," Jackson offered as she joined them on the porch. "Fresh pot." "Maybe later," Martha replied, reaching down to greet Zeus, who nuzzled her hand affectionately. "I'm on my way to the community center. The construction crew needs decisions about the play area." The Bark Foundation Community Center was rising from the ashes of Thompson's crimes, a place of healing built with funds seized from his considerable estate and donations that had poured in from across the country. The center would offer counseling, after-school programs, and family support services, all in a building designed around a central courtyard where a bronze statue of Zeus stood sentinel. "How's the memorial garden coming along?" Emily asked, having designed the therapeutic green space where survivors could find peace. "Beautiful," Martha assured her. "Those roses you selected are perfect, and the plaque for Cassie Reeves arrived yesterday." Cassie Reeves, Thompson's first victim, the little girl who hadn't survived his early experiments. Her remains had been recovered from an unmarked grave near the mining tunnels, finally giving her family the closure they'd sought for years. The garden's central feature was a small fountain dedicated to her memory and to all children who suffered at the hands of those meant to protect them. "Actually, I came by with news," Martha continued, her expression sobering. "The FBI found more of Thompson's research partners. 2 doctors in Chicago, a researcher in Baltimore. They were using his protocols, Jack, using his techniques to test other K9 units." Jackson felt a familiar cold anger settle in his stomach. Despite Thompson's imprisonment, his twisted legacy continued to unfold, like poison spreading through groundwater. They didn't have Zeus's blood samples, though, Martha added quickly, seeing his expression. Those were recovered intact. Whatever Thompson hoped to accomplish with that research died with Aldridge. The knowledge offered small comfort. In the weeks following Lake Chatsworth, Zeus had undergone extensive veterinary testing to ensure Thompson hadn't harmed him during that stolen blood draw. The dog had been given a clean bill of health, but Jackson remained vigilant, checking regularly for any signs of distress or illness. "Will you be at the ceremony tomorrow?" Martha asked, changing the subject. "Sheriff Harrison's officially announcing his run for county commissioner. He's hoping you'll be there to introduce him." Jackson nodded. Harrison had decided to channel his outrage over Thompson's crimes into political action, pushing for stronger protections for children and better resources for law enforcement. His campaign slogan, "Vigilance with Compassion," captured the balance the community was struggling to achieve, protecting the vulnerable without surrendering to paranoia. "Wouldn't miss it," Jackson assured her. "Zeus, too. Harrison says he's his good luck charm." After Martha departed, Emily and Jackson fell into comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher over the autumn landscape. Zeus dozed at their feet, occasional twitches suggesting he was chasing something in his dreams. "I've been thinking," Emily said finally, her voice tentative, "about staying, not just for a visit, but permanently." Jackson tried to keep his expression neutral despite the hope surging in his chest. "What about your practice in Chicago?" "I could transfer my clients, build something here," she replied. "There's going to be need for trauma specialists at the new center, and honestly, Dad, I miss this. Mornings like this. Being home." Home. The word carried so much weight. For years after Claire's death, the house had felt empty, a shell holding memories but little joy. Now, with Emily's presence and Ethan's regular visits, it was coming alive again. "I'd like that," Jackson said simply, knowing his daughter would understand all the emotions contained in those 3 words. The moment was interrupted by Zeus suddenly lifting his head, alert to something beyond human perception. Seconds later, a truck appeared on the drive, Laura's blue Ford, with Ethan's small face visible in the passenger window. "They're early," Emily observed, checking her watch. "Probably couldn't wait." Jackson smiled, watching Zeus trot down the steps to greet the visitors. Ethan was out of the truck before it fully stopped, running to Zeus with the uninhibited joy only children can express. At 9, he'd grown inches since they'd first found him in that dark cellar, his body filling out with proper nutrition and regular meals. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes for weeks after the rescue had gradually faded, replaced by a cautious optimism. "Officer Miller! Miss Emily!" he called, one arm around Zeus's neck. "Mom got the day off. Can we go fishing like you promised?" Laura followed more slowly, her tired features softening as she watched her son. The past months had eased some of her burdens. With Jackson's help and a better job at the hospital secured through Martha's connections, she no longer worked herself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over their heads. "Sorry we're early," she said, mounting the porch steps. "This one was too excited to wait." "No apology needed," Jackson assured her. "The lake's perfect this morning. Still enough for good fishing." The simple domesticity of the moment struck Jackson with unexpected force. How close they had come to a different outcome. If Zeus hadn't been so persistent at the barn, if Jackson hadn't trusted his partner's instincts, if Emily hadn't recognized the pattern at Lake Chatsworth, so many points where tragedy could have prevailed. "Dad?" Emily's voice pulled him back to the present. "You okay?" "Just thinking," he replied softly, "about how things work out sometimes. They gathered fishing gear, packed a picnic lunch, and piled into Jackson's truck for the short drive to Willow Creek Lake. Zeus rode in the back with Ethan, the boy's animated chatter a counterpoint to the dog's dignified attention. The lake stretched before them, mirror-smooth in the autumn stillness. As they unloaded their gear at the small dock, Jackson watched Zeus guide Ethan toward the best fishing spot, the dog seemingly understanding the day's mission. "He's something special, isn't he?" Laura said, coming to stand beside Jackson. "Not just a police dog." "He's family," Jackson replied simply. They settled into lawn chairs while Ethan, under Emily's guidance, baited his hook and made his first cast. Zeus lay nearby, alertly watching the water as if he might spot fish for the boy. "I got a letter," Laura said after a comfortable silence, "from that FBI agent Donovan. They want Ethan to testify when Thompson's trial starts next spring." Jackson frowned. "He's been through enough." "That's what I said," Laura agreed. "But Ethan, he wants to do it. Says Zeus was brave for him, so he needs to be brave too." She smiled faintly. "That dog has a lot to answer for, turning my son into a little hero." The pride in her voice belied any real complaint. They both knew that Ethan's healing was tied to his sense of agency, his ability to transform from victim to survivor. "We'll be with him every step," Jackson promised, "whatever he decides." Further down the shore, Ethan let out a whoop of excitement as his line went taut. Emily moved to help him, but the boy was already reeling confidently, remembering Jackson's lessons from previous outings. "Got one!" he called triumphantly, lifting a respectable bass from the water. Zeus barked once in apparent approval, and Ethan beamed at the dog as if they'd accomplished the feat together. "Your father would have loved this," Laura said softly, watching her son. "David always wanted to teach him to fish." Jackson nodded, understanding the bittersweet nature of the moment. So much loss in all their lives, yet here they were, creating something new from the broken pieces. As the morning stretched into afternoon, they ate sandwiches on the dock, told stories, and caught enough fish for dinner. Ethan dozed against Zeus on the drive home, the simple exhaustion of a good day replacing the trauma-induced nightmares that had plagued him for months. Back at the house, Laura helped Emily in the kitchen while Jackson and a now-awake Ethan cleaned the fish on the back porch, Zeus supervising the operation with dignified interest. "Officer Miller?" Ethan asked, his hands busy with the scaling knife Jackson had taught him to use. "Is it okay that I still get scared sometimes? About the dark place?" Jackson set down his own knife, giving the boy his full attention. "It's more than okay, Ethan. Being scared just means you remember, and remembering helps you stay strong." Ethan considered this, his young face serious. "Zeus doesn't seem scared of anything." "That's not true," Jackson replied gently. "Zeus gets scared too. But he's learned that being scared doesn't have to stop you from doing what's right." "Like when he found us, even though the bad doctor wanted to hurt him?" "Exactly like that." Jackson rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling it and moving forward anyway." Ethan nodded, returning to his task with renewed concentration. "I want to be like Zeus when I grow up." "You already are," Jackson told him, meaning it. That evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, Jackson, Emily, Laura, Ethan, and Zeus settling contentedly at the boy's feet, Jackson found himself overwhelmed by a sense of rightness. Not perfect happiness, they all carried too many scars for that, but something perhaps more valuable, hard-won peace. Outside, twilight settled over Pine Ridge, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: Harrison's campaign announcement, ongoing investigations, the continuing work of healing. But tonight, in this moment, they were simply family, bound by choice rather than blood, stronger for having faced darkness together. As they finished dessert, Ethan predictably devouring 2 slices of Emily's apple pie. Laura shared news about the boy's improving grades, his new friends at school, his growing interest in working with animals. "He told his teacher he wants to train police dogs when he grows up," she said, smiling at Jackson. "Wonder where he got that idea." Ethan ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. "Zeus says I'd be good at it." The adults exchanged warm glances at the boy's certainty about what Zeus said, none of them willing to question the special bond he'd formed with the dog who'd saved his life. Later, after Laura and Ethan had departed with promises to return for Sunday dinner, Jackson and Emily sat on the porch swing, Zeus stretched at their feet. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet darkness. "You know," Emily said thoughtfully, "when I was studying trauma recovery, they taught us that healing isn't about forgetting or even forgiving sometimes. It's about building something new alongside the hurt, something strong enough to carry it." Jackson considered her words, thinking of all they'd endured and all they were creating. "Seems like we're doing okay then." "Better than okay," Emily agreed, leaning against his shoulder like she had as a child. Zeus shifted at their feet, settling into a more comfortable position with a contented sigh. The simple sound contained multitudes: safety, loyalty, home. Across town, the nearly completed community center stood as testament to a town's resilience. At its heart, the bronze statue of Zeus kept eternal watch, one paw raised as if pointing the way forward. The plaque beneath it read simply, "For those who bark when others stay silent." Jackson reached down to scratch behind Zeus's ears, earning a sleepy thump of tail against the porch boards. "Good boy," he whispered, the familiar words carrying all the gratitude he could never fully express. "You know what Mrs. Abernathy said when I saw her at the grocery store yesterday?" Emily asked, referring to their elderly neighbor who had lived in Pine Ridge for over 80 years. "What's that?" She said, "The Lord sends his angels in many forms. Sometimes they even have 4 paws." Emily smiled. "Can't say I disagree with her." Jackson looked down at Zeus, peacefully dozing after another day of unwavering loyalty. In this dog, this extraordinary, ordinary creature, he had found not just a partner but a path back to life after loss, a bridge between past and future. The night deepened around them, peaceful and vast. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own moments of grace. For now it was enough to sit in the quiet, Emily beside him, Zeus at his feet, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. "Good boy," Jackson whispered again, the simple words encompassing all that could not be said. Good boy. They thought the barn was empty until canine Zeus started barking at the ground. We witnessed the extraordinary bond between a man and his loyal German shepherd that reminds us of life's most precious gifts, second chances, and unconditional love. As we age, many of us understand loss all too well, be it spouses, friendships, or purpose. Yet Jackson's journey shows us it's never too late to rebuild family connections and find new meaning. Zeus's unwavering loyalty mirrors the faithful companions who've brightened our own lives, while Emily's return home reflects the healing power of forgiveness and reconciliation that many of us seek with our own children. The simple moments, fishing with Ethan, morning coffee on the porch, Zeus's protective presence, remind us that joy often resides in ordinary days, not grand gestures. Has a loyal animal ever helped you through a difficult period in your life? Or perhaps you've experienced the blessing of reconnecting with family after years of distance. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.